Hey, my name's ShawNshawN, and I sell art on ShawNshawN.co and specials on eBay. Today we're going to review Queen and Slim. So it's a film by Melina Matsoukas. The time is 2 hours, 11 minutes, a little bit long. Daniel Kaluuya stars as Slim, this guy that goes on a date with this woman. Jodie Turner is his date's queen. And Bokeem Woodbine is Uncle Earl, the uncle of Queen. So the story is of two young people on a date. They kind of have this Tinder hookup, and the guy, it's Tinder, right? So, and so they go to this diner, and she's like, "Man, this diner's lame." He's like, "Yeah, but it's a black diner, black owned, so they're kind of supporting the community, which makes sense." So a lot of little connections there. She's a lawyer. I don't really think they get into what he does too much. So then they go home, they've had a nice day. She grabs his phone because he grabs his phone back from her because she gave him directions. He's like, "Hey, she doesn't know how to do directions," right? They kind of swerve on the road a little bit. Cops pulls him over. I think it's, drunk. Calls in and, "Hey, I think there's a DUI." Pulls him up. He's really rough with them, and they're getting freaked out. They're like, "Oh my God, what the hell's with this guy?" And he tells them, "Get out of the car." And they're like, "Why the hell do they have to get out of the car?" And then she's like, "I want to reach my purse for my phone." And the cop thinks it's a gun, so he kind of, boom, shoots her, grazes her leg, and then Slim tackles the cop. They wrestle around. He gets away. And then he shoots the cop. So this kind of sets the stage from Act 1, boom, right into Act 2, they're on the chase, right? So from there they go from they're trying to stay one step ahead of the cops. They figure out they need to get out of the country completely. They're never going to be free. So that's kind of where it goes into plot Acts 2 and 3. In the meantime, kind of in Act 2, Queen they go at her uncle's house, and her uncle's kind of this local pimp, I think, in New Orleans. So they make it all the way down from Cleveland, Ohio, all the way down to New Orleans. And she has to kind of confront her past a little bit. They do it a little bit well, in the sense that she brings up the story, but I don't know if the conflict was there. So what happened there was the uncle accidentally killed her mother. She had just gotten out of law school. She was looking to do her first case, so she did the case of her uncle and defended him against her mother's wrongful death, and got him off as innocent. So they have that little tension there as far as, she was desperate to get her first case right out of law school to prove herself. And there's not much work for black lawyers, so that's kind of that quandary what she went through. So they cover that a little bit. That's pretty interesting. And then they go to a couple more safe houses before they're gonna fly out of the country, hopefully. I don't know, when I got into this, I thought it was gonna be like Thelma and Louise, where Thelma and Louise, they get in some trouble and they're going around and there's a little bit of chase scenes. They run into dodgy characters, and then in the end they kind of drive off a cliff, right? So a very similar movie in that sense, except instead of whites, it's blacks. That's fine. You get a little bit more of the culture of Black Lives Matter, in the sense that blacks are being shot all the time by the police. You have a protest in the NFL. These players got kicked out of the NFL just for protesting this. So it's really interesting. They kind of have this as the understory. I'm not sure if they make that connection as well. I kind of get what they're going there. I don't know if one person would strive up a protest, but it's hard to say. There's been so many kids killed for just really stupid things. So I think what they could have done there is maybe done less scenes on the couple and more behind the scenes, where the family's being harassed by the police. Like, where's your people at? Flip back to, just show more of the shakeout of different neighborhoods as you go along, because this is kind of what would happen behind the scenes. And then you would feel the pressure build. So in the film, they're always kind of away from the police. In the very end, the police get him, of course. Well, not of course, but that's one realistic possibility, right? That the police would eventually catch them. So that's fine, but they should have had, I think, more drama out of that, showing the police with the father, which they do show briefly, but not that much. And then I think they should just cut more scenes out of the chase part, because there wasn't that much chasing, to be honest, and done it more about the background and how she gets there, why her mother was killed. They should have included that shot. That would have been great with Uncle Earl. Maybe Uncle Earl's story about how he went to Iraq and he was messed up, and that's why he was kind of, the mother and him had a falling out. I think that would have kind of put the story a little bit more together. Like, you show Uncle Earl with this other partner that helps him out. They don't show that they're buddies back in Iraq. Obviously it would have been super expensive to shoot somewhere in Iraq, but they could have shot it in Arizona with a fake town or something. They probably had a limited budget, so that's probably why they didn't do it. But I think that would have gelled this story a little bit more together if you have different cuts from just more B-roll and side plots to kind of bowl into this main plot. That way you get this evolution for Queen, and you have some of it, but it's just, since they just kind of tell the story, they don't really show the story. Again, there's not much backstory again for Slim. I think they could have developed that character more. He's a really good actor, obviously, from Get Out, but I don't know, I just felt like, he's obviously he's kind of her side she's the main character kind of, and he's the side guy, but you know, there just wasn't that much development of why he doesn't drink, why doesn't he smoke. They could have been a backstory there, as like something happened in his past. He could at least told the story, maybe that would have made more to it. Money wise in the film, it's realistic in that they kind of screw up and they lose their clothes and they lose their money and then they're broke and then they run out of gas and then they have to hitch a ride. And so there's all these kind of realistic scenarios. If you're on the run, just being on the fly, you wouldn't have this all planned out, and it would go astray really fast, and not having that much money, it would go astray really fast. So that's, I think, realistic. They had the lawyer. I mean, she could have drawn down her account. I'm sure she had a couple thousand maybe in her account. Maybe she didn't, but it seems like she would have had some money maybe. But I don't know, I guess money wise that made sense. The really interesting point, I think, on the strong point of the film is kind of the music. They discuss different styles, different genres, different decades of R&B, different decades of a little bit of rap as well, and you have that contrast where they discuss different music choices, which kind of moves the story along really nicely. Really great music. They must have got good deals on all these records to play that many. Yeah, they have some symbolism in the film, like they have these sharecroppers when they're going through Georgia, and you got this real deep connection with slavery, and that they're kind of like runaway slaves. They have that earlier remark early in the film, so they have a little bit of symbolic connection, but it doesn't always connect well, I think. I mean, I get the reference because I'm American and I've grown up with blacks, but if you're not, and you grow up in a different minority group and you grow up in the city and you're not really exposed to this, I don't know if that's gonna, all those factors are gonna kind of trigger and gel well. If you're from the urban environment, like I grew up partially in my childhood in Chicago, you get all those references, but I don't know if all those references kind of come together. They assume a lot in the film, which is fine for the audience, but if you want to get to a wider audience, you kind of have to not dumb it down, but you just make those symbolisms a little more clear. And I don't know if they made all the clear connections there. It was a really nice story, I would say, in that it's realistic, it's modern. I felt at sometimes though, the chase scenes, they're just driving down the highway. I don't feel like they're really being chased. I don't feel like the police are closing in on them at all. So in that aspect, they don't drive up the suspense, the drama of the reality of that. You would have to have the cops kind of closing in on them, maybe have some side cop characters to show that they're kind of closing in on them, and maybe the family arguing behind the scenes, like, hey, they're innocent but they're not innocent, da 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 da. Some of that drama that would have brought into there. You don't need it, but I think it would have added more to the story from my standpoint, because it just seemed like it was this long drive, not much was happening, at least from the aspect of, are they going to get caught, are they not going to get caught? There's just not that much there, as far as they're generally getting a good thing with everyone, and then they have one betrayal in the whole thing, so it kind of spins out of control at that point. Overall, it's an interesting movie. Really great music choice. I'd say it's a B. It's not an A, you know. Some movies just have more meat to it, and this one, it kind of just doesn't make that character evolution so that you care as much about the characters. I think that's the flaw in this movie. The characters are there and they kind of slowly evolve, but I don't feel like they evolve that much, and you really need that character evolution within the story for it to make a really serious story. Like if you take, like, say, Jojo Rabbit comparison, there's this great character arc through all the characters, and I don't really get that in this aspect. I mean, they did something stupid, then they did something unstupid. They doubled up their stupidity by driving away from the police scene. And that's the movie, right? But that's kind of all there is. There's just that real subtle development in the beginning. You don't really get their past so much. And then they cut their hair to kind of go in disguise, but it's just not much of a character evolution. And then, so acts 2 and 3, it's kind of like one long thing and then just a little tiny change at the end, I would say. So yeah, kind of like a B movie, I would say. I don't want to rate it lower. I think they put a lot of heart into this, but I don't know if it really worked as well as I'd want it. It's definitely not Black Panther, which fucking kicked ass, right? So that's my take for the movie. Hopefully you guys like it. If you want to subscribe, you can subscribe below, and I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.